Hello, my name is Rachel Locke. I'm a student at Christopher Newport University, and I am so excited to welcome Michele Glass. Michele, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. So my name is Michele Glass, and I've been a teacher at Northeast State for probably about 10 years as a faculty member. Before that, I worked in the laboratory. So I do teach biology, I teach anatomy and physiology, microbiology lab, and I also teach an environmental science class.
Awesome, wonderful. Thank you so much. So I want to begin with a foundational question for you. What brought you to Northeast Tennessee?
To the region?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, and I suppose to the college as well, but either
Okay.
way.
Okay. So I lived a few places growing up. So my family lived in Georgia for a little bit, and then we lived kind of in the Fort Lauderdale, Florida area for a little while, and then kind of central Indiana. And so really that's the longest place I lived with my family. So we were there from like my third grade until high school. And when it was time for me to look for college, I actually started at Milligan. It was Milligan College at the time. And I met my husband there and we got married really like right after first year of school. And so then he was a Tennessee resident, and we were making some different choices. And so I ended up transferring from Milligan to East Tennessee State University. And so that's actually where I finished both of my degrees. So I have undergraduate was biology education, and then my master's is in biology. And really, I just, fell in love with the area. So I really enjoy the mountains and the access to woods and waterfalls and creeks. And it just really began to feel like home. So I've actually lived in this region longer, than anywhere. So I'm not original to here, but, and then I just kind of happened into the job at Northeast State, and it was a really good fit for me. I did want to teach, and I wanted to teach biology, and I never imagined teaching at college level. And so that was like a really nice surprise that I could walk into that environment and be qualified to teach. So then I've been at Northeast State. It's probably getting close to 20 years. So
Wow.
yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So how did you become interested in environmental science? Who or what inspired you?
I suppose Earth.
Yeah.
I suppose the Earth inspired me. I was always the kid who wanted to play outside. So even just, I have memories of playing in, the yard at the house. I'd make these big soups with like the grass clippings and my mom's flowers. And then in our subdivision, there was a little creek that had a tree line. And then on one side was subdivision, and the other side was, depending on the year, either corn or soybean field.
Oh.
And so, that little strip of, to me, it felt like woods. And so I was able to, walk down to that and play in that by myself. So I spent a lot of time doing that growing up. And it's my go-to place, I guess.
Did you always know that that was what you wanted to do and go into?
Well, I started Milligan as a nursing student, so I thought that was my route. And I worked in a nursing home for probably 3 years. It's a really hard job. I worked as a certified nurse's aide. And I realized that's not really how I wanted to spend my life. It wasn't really a good fit for me. But I had enjoyed my science classes. So I'd already started nursing school at Milligan. So I had taken my anatomy, physiology, microbiology, and enjoyed it. I loved those classes, felt good at that, wanted to do more in that area. So when I realized the healthcare profession wasn't for me, I wanted to stick with the sciences. So of course, biology was the route that made the most sense for me. So then it became, I was able to sort of combine this feeling of home in the woods and all that with now this new kind of biological conservation understanding. So it was a really nice fit for me.
Wonderful. Can you identify and talk about some of the interesting places in Northeast Tennessee that showcase our region's unique environment?
Okay, so I was thinking about this, and I think for me, I mentioned I lived in central Indiana, which is flat, flat. So waterfalls seem so like amazing and spectacular because that wasn't something that I'd grown up around at all. And I always really am drawn to water. So any places where there's a little bit of a cascade or waterfalls, which is really easy to find in our area. So I do like places that showcase that water aspect. So places I like to go would be Devil's Bathtub in Duffield, Virginia is a really special spot, and you get waterfalls, you get cascades, you have to traverse the creek, multiple crossings, and you get some really neat views there. Blue Hole in Elizabethton is also a really easy, accessible waterfall. So that was one of my first introductions. Actually, my very first introduction to waterfalls in the area was Laurel Falls in Hampton. And so that's always a classic go-to for me. And there's lots of places, like Rocky Fork is a really great, fairly new state park in Irwin that's pretty accessible. It's pretty easy to walk along and see that cascade area. So I like those areas. And then, of course, mountain views. Again, like coming from flatland, the mountains feel really spectacular. So being able to kind of climb up to the top and see that view is always really impressive. So ones I like to visit, would be like Carver's Gap and on Roan Mountain. So that's fairly easy to get to. My family also likes to go to Grayson Highlands.
I love Grayson Highlands.
Yeah,
it's beautiful.
And then you have those wild ponies that are there helping to kind of maintain that bald. So those balds are just a really unique, special thing that we have in the Southern Appalachians. That's just not something that's found other places. You go up to the top of the mountain and all of a sudden there's no trees and you get this great view. That's not a common feature, although it feels common when you live here. And then I always appreciate the rhododendron forest. So I'm not even talking about when they're in bloom and spectacular in that way. I just like that feel of, walking through. And so that's pretty easy. And to me feels very regional in East Tennessee, because that's another thing that I didn't grow up being around. So I think those aspects kind of feel special and magical and part of like what I fell in love with in this area.
That's interesting because I grew up in the area as well, and those are things that always seemed just
normal.
Innate. Yeah, normal. They didn't seem super special, but it is really, really beautiful and I guess unique. So
it is, yeah. It's definitely something that if you want to be familiar with the place, you need to explore. And I know that people who live here that don't go out into the woods, they don't know. And I'm discovering that more and more as I go with students, either in my environmental science class or I co-advise the Greens Club. And so a lot of times we try to do little hikes together. And, we have a lot of people that this is what's special about our place, but we're not all exploring it. So it's really nice to get those opportunities to seek that out.
Awesome. What rare or surprising wildlife exists in our area? For example, do we have any endangered species or anything that you find particularly interesting?
Yeah, so I was going to, let's see, I think I wrote down a website, but maybe I didn't write down the website. If I put something in the chat, do you think that shows up on the interview?
I'm not sure if it does, but I don't think so.
Okay, so I can get this link if we are interested in having that added in some way. But if you go to the Tennessee Department of Environment Conservation, you can get a full list by county. And so you can see what we have in the county. So we do have a lot of species that are classified in different ways. So we have what's called threatened, which means likely to be endangered. And then we have endangered, which means it's at risk of going extinct. And then you have what are called rare, which means they have a very small population. And then we also have what's called rare and endemic. And that means it's a small population and it's only in this one particular area. Okay. So we have all of that in this area, meaning Carter County, Sullivan County, Washington County. So you're going to be able to find species that are listed in all these ways. Roan Mountain has several species that are named for Roan Mountain. So that's pretty interesting. So they have a spruce fir moss spider, and it is the world's smallest tarantula.
Oh my gosh.
We have a tarantula that lives on Roan Mountain. We have a Carolina northern flying squirrel that's found in Roan Mountain that is listed as endangered. We have several plants. So there is a Roan Mountain bluet and a Roan Mountain sedge. So these are plants that are specific. They're named, even their scientific name is got Roan Mountain as part of the name. So those are ones that would be specific. Shady Valley has a Nature Conservancy property. They have in protection cranberry bogs. So these are cranberries that are growing in Shady Valley. And then also in that area, there's a southern bog turtle, which is a federally threatened turtles. So that's part of how Nature Conservancy is able to have and manage that particular property. And then there's several other plants and things that are there. So there's quite a lot to explore in our region for sure.
Have you gotten to work with any of these plants or animals?
I have not. So my particular research that I did as for my master's project, so that was my thesis for master's, was with a wildflower called Miami mist, would be like the common name. Its scientific name is Phacelia pershii, and then the Miami mist is more common in lower elevations, and it's got a purple color to the flower. And then there's a species that you find at higher elevations, which pretty much they look the same, but it's white. So in the lower elevations, and it's not purple all the way, it's purple like on the edges of the petals. And then you go up higher elevations and it's all white. So our question was, are these two plants actually different species, or are we seeing like a purple variety lower down and then a white variety higher up? So we concluded that they were different species. So the purple is Phacelia pershii, and that's the common name Miami mist. And then the white one is Phacelia fimbriata. And I don't know if it has a common name. So those are the plants that I've worked with directly. And I was doing my master's work while I was already working at Northeast State in the laboratories and teaching. And so, from there, I haven't really done any additional research or worked in the field in that way. So I was able to pretty much complete my undergraduate work. I worked at Warriors Path State Park for summer with Marty Silver, doing nature programs and that sort of thing. And then I was able to transition into a full-time job at Northeast State. And so, that pretty much took my time, I guess, and my interest. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So you serve as the faculty advisor for the college's Greens student organization. What is the purpose and focus of Greens?
So Greens Club stands for it's an acronym. So if I get it right, it's Grassroots Environmental Efforts at Northeast State. And it was put into place before I got involved. So Jim Henricks is still an advisor for the club, and he's one of our enrollment officers. And then there was another faculty member, Reese Behringer, he was involved at that time. And then I got involved. It's probably been 4 years ago now. And so we do like to educational efforts. That's one piece, right? So we do try to create opportunities on campus for students, faculty, staff, to kind of teach about environmental issues. It's also an opportunity for students who have this interest to get together, right? So hopefully there's this social and community aspect to the club as well. And then, we've tried to teach club members too, right? So as we talk through different things, then hopefully there's some learning there. So we've done activities like, we've always done Earth Day activities or Earth Week activities. And so a lot of times maybe we'll have a display with some information. We've done some instructions on what recycles and what doesn't, because that can be very confusing. Right before COVID hit. So we tried to, in March 2020, do a meatless March campaign. So we were trying to get students to go meatless on Mondays in March. And we had spring break in there, and then we all quarantined. So of course that was kind of a fail, but we might be able to do something like that again. In the fall, we tried to do like a social media environmental justice campaign. So environmental justice is looking at that intersection between environment, racism, social justice issues. So we did some education there, mostly like on our Instagram and Facebook. And then there's a community garden on campus. And so the Greens Club has been involved in that from the beginning at various levels. So there's been times where the Greens Club planted and maintained, there's maybe 29 raised beds. And that's a lot to take care of, especially in the summer when that's your growing season and students aren't on campus. And so then we've gradually turned that into more of like an adopt-a-bed garden. And so mostly it's faculty and staff members who are working in the summer and available for that. But so that has allowed us to have produce that we could donate. So we've donated produce to Second Harvest and made it available for students on campus. Taught students about how to plant seeds a little bit, and so it's had that purpose that way too. So the Greens is still involved in that, but it's evolving and morphing over time.
That's amazing. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So do you think locally that we're becoming more or less environmentally conscious? And why or why not?
So you actually gave me that question before our interview, so I've had a little bit of time to think about it, and I can't decide on an answer at all. I think there's still pockets of people who are interested. I think a lot of people are interested and don't know what they can do. I think it takes a lot of effort to do those little things. And I think a lot of people feel overwhelmed or like those efforts aren't going to matter. So, for instance, reusable bags at the grocery store can be a pretty significant, fairly easy thing to do. A person has to sort of retrain themselves to get those reusable bags, bring them into the store with them. And then it's awkward sometimes because you're grocery stores and everything is set up to just automatically start putting stuff into the plastic bag. And so you do have to be like, oh, wait, please stop. Don't, I don't want the plastic bag, and so some people, I think, even were kind of learning that. And then, of course, with this last year of COVID restrictions, that stopped being available option.
Mhm.
And so I think we're going to have to do a little bit of retraining on that. I think a lot of people find it easier at their house to use plastic ware, disposable plates, paper napkins. These are things that are convenient in that moment. But when we consider that, the plastic for that spoon is based on fossil fuel, it's manufactured, it's shipped, you have to go buy it, you have to pick it up, you have to throw it away. It's no longer convenient. It's easier to use, put something that you have to wash, right?
Mhm.
But you have to do the effort of washing in that day. A paper towel, paper napkin feels so easy. We don't want to clean up our ketchup mess with our nice towel because it'll leave a stain on our towel, right? But so we use a paper towel and we throw it away. So, but where did that paper towel come from?
Yeah.
It's more convenient to just have stained kitchen towels that you can just reuse. And once you get that first stain, it's easier to get the second stain. So I have to teach my mother when she comes to visit, I don't need new towels because my towels are going to look like this because I use them.
Mhm.
And so I think there's some of this kind of convenience mindset that we still have to train our way out of. So maybe I think people are not really, I think we also don't understand the recycling, and we don't know that, because even this is something for me that's had to kind of wrap my mind around, if there's no market for the recycling on the other end, it's not cost effective for anybody to collect and process that material. So then it's garbage. So I think a lot of times even people who recycle think I can buy whatever in whatever container because I'm going to put it in the recycle bin, without realizing that a lot of that material isn't actually recycled on the other side. So we have to actually get into a new mindset of refuse, reuse. I'm going to add in a repair.
Because the fewer things that are going into even the recycling, the fewer just plastics and stuff is out there, I guess.
And a lot of this connects to the company because the company is deciding what kind of packaging. There's so many different types of plastics. Most places only recycle number 1 and number 2. So anything that's like a yogurt container, sour cream container, ricotta cheese container, food containers are usually number 5. So that's not an easy to recycle item. You can't put it in your number 1, your number 2, because you ruin the recycling stream, and then all of it is garbage. So you've just created more garbage. So, if our companies can streamline and we're all using one type of plastic, now we can recycle it. If they're not adding in a lot of color to the plastic, now it can be more easily recycled. But then there has to be a market for that recycled plastic product. So then people would have to be purchasing materials on the other side that's recycled. So I think even for me, that was an aha, I need to make sure that if I'm able to buy something that's made of recycled material, that I choose that, because that's closing that circle, right? It's helping to do that. So there's a lot of these little bits, and it takes intention, it takes effort, and it takes education. And I don't know that, I think we feel overwhelmed and we feel like in this moment, it doesn't matter. My little thing isn't gonna really add in.
But it does.
Maybe. It's hard to know. And a lot of the, climate change responsibility is not so much the individual, but the industry and the factories and all of that. And, you know, individual people, that becomes hard. So then it goes to government policies, and that goes to your vote. So in addition to looking at, you know, your little actions that you're doing on the daily, you have to be politically involved. Otherwise, there's not going to be change, because your company is there for profit. And so they're going to do what's most profitable for the bottom line, in my opinion, without the government intervention. So you do need to have an involvement with your political process and your vote, so that, you know, you can start to see some policies, systemic changes. So there is only so much an individual person can do, I think.
And so you were talking about how, you know, education is a big part of people understanding this impact and how the whole thing works. Where would someone go if they wanted to know and learn more about their local environment, and then, I guess, beyond that, about taking care of that environment?
That's a great question. So I think, you know, depending on your local environment, if you're just, I think your first step is to become comfortable with where you are. So I think your first step is to see yourself as part of your place. And so I think for me, that means being in my community and being in my local woods, creeks. So if you're spending time and your family goes to South Holston Lake as a regular part of your activities, you're going to care about what happens to South Holston Lake. And so now you're going to see, like, oh, I don't like it when people trash up my lake, right? So there's an ownership, a feeling of belonging in that place. If there's a certain park that you like to visit on the regular, you begin to recognize, when do you start to see your first spring flowers, and you learn where they're located, and when the leaves begin to come out on the trees, or when the leaves start to turn, or where you can sneak and find blackberries or blueberries or pawpaws, you know, out in your community, because you've been there different seasons and you see what's there. So I really think the first step is to step outside and fall in love with the place. And once you fall in love with the place and a community, then you can begin to see that you are connected to that place and that community. They're connected to you, and maybe your actions don't affect the whole planet, but maybe they affect your place, right? And so I think really that's what we should do. So if you're looking for a place to hike, I do know there's, like, locally, there's Facebook hiking groups. So especially if you, like, I want a buddy to hike with, that might be something that you look for. I know recently I was added to a group that's like girls who hike. So that's really nice, right? Because this brings up a question. There's a lot of people who are not comfortable to just walk out into their woods, right? So a lot of times females feel like it's not safe for them to be out in the woods by themselves, right? Maybe a person of color may not feel safe to just go out historically, be in the woods. That may not be a safe place, or may not feel like a safe place for that person. Somebody trans person or person in LGBT community may not feel like it's a safe place to go out by yourself in the woods. Could be a bear you come across, could be an angry person you come across, right? So we do have to take care of our safety. So sometimes finding a group where you can comfortably be out there. So I do know there's several outdoor groups on Facebook, and I know there's some that are like the girls one that I got added to. I've seen others that are, part of these marginalized communities. So you can group together and be out there. So that can be an avenue. I personally use All Trails app. So this is a nice way of finding trails in your area. Usually has a little bit information about how easy or hard the trail might be. So that's another question about able-bodiedness? Are you able to actually be out? How hard is that trail? Are you physically able to do that? So that can be a question for folks, right? So sometimes that's a nice app because it gives you some of that information. It gives you driving directions usually. So that can be nice. But there's so many city, state parks, and you don't have to be on a trail, to feel part of that nature. So there's lots of places where you can drive to and be present that way. You can create that space in your garden. So if you are lucky enough to have a patio or an outside space that you can plant in and cultivate, you can create something for yourself that way. You can bring in birds with bird feeders, right? So that's my easiest way to learn birds, is to hang my bird feeder right out my kitchen window. And so I'm doing my dishes and I can see who's there and they're up close and I can look them up. And so now I know who they are, right? Before I maybe had trouble seeing them. They're hard to see in the woods, right? So I would say, get yourself a little bit of nature, even if it's just a house plant, right? This is an important piece for you to learn that you're connected. This matters. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, that was my last question. So thank you so much for being here. It was wonderful to meet you and to talk to you.
You too. Thanks for having me.
Of course.